Hey, everybody. Welcome to the College Football Insiders. I am Brendan Marcello, joined by Richard Johnson, Shehan Jayaraja, and Matt Zenitz. It's week 5. We got a lot of games to talk about, a lot of intel to share, and, of course, college football never sleeps. A lot of things going on. We had the firing of an absolute icon in the college football industry of Mike Gundy. I recommend you go back and listen to the previous episode this week where Richard Johnson and crew went through that and the potential candidates we might see there at Oklahoma State rise into the ranks after the firing of an icon, someone who'd been there for years, and a lot of changes going on at Oklahoma State, and a lot more changes potentially coming up after this week with some big games on tap, including some coaches that are already on the hot seat facing some pressure. So how are we feeling, guys? We ready to jump into it?
Well, as long as no coach wants to get fired an hour before our show or an hour after our show, I'm feeling good.
Yeah, and as long as no athletic director extensions are given out after we record the show, right after we talk about how we don't know who the leadership is going to be.
I don't think we've ever seen a Tuesday firing in college football in the middle of the season. We're recording this on a Thursday, so let's see what Thursday has in store for us before a big week 5. Guys, let's jump right into our weekly segment of the Pressure Index. Whether we're talking about coaches, players, or programs facing a lot of pressure heading into this week's games, we're going to kind of break it down, look at the 30,000-foot view of these storylines and why these games are so important for certain subjects. Let's start with number 3 Penn State at number 6 Oregon at number 3 Penn State. Biggest game of the week. Richard, you're going to be there. I'm incredibly jealous. Not jealous of you having to drive in. That's going to be a very difficult drive in and out. But what a game. What an atmosphere. The whiteout. Penn State's won 4 straight whiteout games. Oregon, Penn State, a game that is a rematch of the Big Ten championship game last year that was pretty entertaining going down to the wire when it seemed like it was getting out of hand. But Oregon winning that one. Penn State favored going into this. And as we all know, the storyline around Penn State for the last better part of 3 to 4 years is, can James Franklin win the big one? Can he win big games against top 5 opponents? We know his record. He struggles with that. And also, James Franklin just got off one thing where he finally got into the college football playoff, and they made some noise. They looked good in the college football playoff, returned so much. Now this is their big moment. They played a cupcake schedule. No bigger game in college football this week than Oregon coming in to Happy Valley. Big, big moment for James Franklin, gentlemen.
Yeah, I am pleased to report that I have secured a couch in State College in close proximity to the stadium for Friday night. So I'm going to be okay. I don't have to stay in Williamsport, which is about an hour and change away from the stadium. It's difficult. Nowhere to fly, and got to drive in from the college football mecca that is Brooklyn, New York, where I currently am. Cannot wait for this game. You know, I think that, yes, in name only did James Franklin get over the hump last year, sort of, when they won those first 2 playoff games. But then, you know, you look at who they played. They got the easiest path of anybody to the semifinal that they inevitably lost to Notre Dame. So it's sort of like he's done half the job, but not all the job, because obviously they still lost the Big Ten championship game to this Oregon team that they're about to rematch against. I think this is a gut check for both teams. I don't think either team has played an opponent of significant challenge that can significantly push them. You know, Oklahoma State, sure, power conference opponent, but that's as uncompetitive as a power conference team can look a couple weeks ago. And then you just saw what happened to their coach on Tuesday. Oregon State, I don't think is any good either. So, like, I look at Oregon's schedule and I say, okay, well, I think Oregon and Penn State are both in the same spot of they just haven't really played anybody. I cannot wait for how they're going to look. I cannot wait for the unique things that they're going to bring to the table. We know Will Stein always has some tricks up his sleeve, and we know Andy Kotelnick has got some tricks up his sleeve as a play caller. The fact that neither of these teams have played much of anybody means that I don't think either of these teams have had to really kind of go deep into their bag. I think that they're going to have some bells and whistles on Saturday, especially Penn State coming off of the bye week in this game. Cannot wait for the whiteout atmosphere on Saturday night.
True measuring stick for both teams. Like you mentioned with Oregon, the toughest competition for them to date has been Mike Gundy led Oklahoma State, which Oregon won 69-3 or whatever the score was in that game, Northwestern and Oregon State. And for Penn State, this is the first opponent this year that they faced that's a Power 4 team. So 2 programs that very much capable of making a run to the playoff, competing for conference title, competing for a national championship. This will give us a much better feel just of the true capability, considering this is far and away for both teams, the best opponent that they've seen so far.
Richard, I'm curious. Like, you look at this early slate for Penn State, right? Nevada, FIU, Villanova. That's about as lackluster a non-conference slate as you'll ever find at the power conference level.
FIU beat FAU. Come on.
Hey,
Shula Bowl, baby.
They did. Got some questions about my boy Zach Kitley over at FAU right now. But all that said, like, do you think that this is something that's like bad for the sport? You look at the last 2 years, right? Because of some cancellations, Michigan doesn't play a power conference non-con. Ohio State last year gets out of it, and both of them go on to win the national title. Is this something that you view is a problem that needs to be changed, that the Big Ten needs to address?
Yeah, I think everybody should be playing 10 power conference opponents because there's a couple things that go into it. First and foremost, there is the playoff thing, which I know we're going to talk about later in the show. At the end of the day, this little tit-for-tat match between the SEC, Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, and Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, about the future of the playoff. What I do think is a fair point is that everybody gets on the level footing with the amount of power conference opponents that they play. I do think that's fair. It doesn't necessarily have to be conference opponents, but it has to be power conference opponents. What I do think that helps, frankly, is strength of schedule, especially when one of those power conference opponents is an outer conference opponent. Obviously, the SEC and the ACC, pretty much all of them, their interconference rivalries have at least one out-of-conference opponent. That helps strength of schedule because to make an accurate strength of schedule metric that actually works, you have to have the leagues playing each other. You have to have the nodes sort of interconnecting. That's why strength of schedule is pretty infallible for the NFL, for instance. It's how they determine draft picks in a tiebreaker. We don't necessarily have that in college football. Our strength of schedule is pretty borked. That's why strength of record is something that they baked into the equation. And it's something that I think you're going to see more and more as something that's talked about when we get to the college football playoff rankings reveals every Tuesday night. I think the other thing, Shehan, is that at the end of the day, all these athletic directors know that it's bad for the bottom line to have a Villanova, for instance, have 3 Villanovas, for instance, as your out-of-conference opponents. Penn State is going through a massive renovation of that stadium. And you're going to want to put butts in, not just seats, in premium seats moving forward. That's a little bit more difficult to do when your opponents are Kent State and Villanova and FIU and the teams that we've stated. So I understand that James Franklin wants some tune-ups. I understand that as far as James Franklin is concerned, this is probably as perfect a non-con as he could get. We know he don't want to play Pitt because he knows that they don't really feel like they have much to lose, that Pitt has much to lose in a Pitt-Penn State game, but Penn State has everything to lose in a Penn State-Pitt game. So it's James Franklin's perfect non-con, but I think as a fan, or if you're worried about Penn State's bottom line, it ain't your perfect non-con.
James Franklin, like James Franklin, 2-20 all time against top 6 opponents in the AP poll. That's tied for the second worst by any FBS head coach ever. And then also, you look at the schedule. There's only 4 programs next year in the power conferences that are not going to play 10 power conference opponents. And they're all in the Big Ten, of course. Indiana, Nebraska, Penn State, and Washington. Washington actually has an opening on their schedule, according to my research so far, so maybe that could change. But again, the onus is on the Big Ten, and it certainly seems like Penn State's not wanting to change their tune in the future with their scheduling either.
Frankly, I don't know if this is the perfect setup from James Franklin's perspective, because when you look at his quarterback, for example, his quarterback, just being completely real, needs to play at a higher level than he did last year for Penn State to accomplish some of the things that they're capable of accomplishing this year. And to me, it would be beneficial to have a more quality opponent. No offense to Nevada, FIU, or Villanova, but it would be beneficial for Drew Allar to have had maybe a more quality opponent leading up to this game, so you're not making that kind of significant jump heading into this game against Oregon. And also with Drew, there's still a significant level of unknown there. Like they played lesser competition, but for people that watched Penn State the last few weeks, Drew was far from perfect, had a completion percentage below 60% in each of the last couple of games. And there are still some concerns there just in terms of whether he's going to be able to play at the kind of level that Penn State needs him to in order to accomplish the things that they are capable of accomplishing this season.
I love the research notes from the CBS Sports research team because you just mentioned Drew Allar. Listen to this stat. This is incredible. This is digging deep. Drew Allar has the fewest yards per pass attempt at 5.2 against top 6 teams by any quarterback with 5+ starts in the past 10 seasons. So a lot of numbers there, but still 5.2 yards per pass attempt against top quality opponents. NFL scouts are going to be sitting there going, this guy looks great. He can do it.
NFL scouts has some big time reservations about Drew Allar right now. I'll just say that. So Drew getting hyped up. I know a lot in the media is a potential first round draft pick. Drew has a lot to prove and says some things that he definitely needs to improve on in terms of his tape compared to the last couple of years and last season, if he's going to have any chance of going in the first round. And Saturday, obviously a big showcase opportunity for him.
And let's close out the matchup with this, right? Because we've talked a lot about Penn State and what they need. And I think that they are clearly the more desperate team in this game. This is a moment where Penn State needs to arrive. But what I'll also say is that Oregon has looked like a perfect football team through 4 games. Like you look offense, defense, special teams, running game, passing game, they have been unstoppable in every single aspect of the game. And the competition is what it is. But I'll tell you what, we just talked about Penn State's competition. They have not looked infallible through the first 3 or 4 games. We can question whether they're holding some things back. I think they clearly are. But the fact is that Oregon is coming into these games and beating teams up with sort of their base offense. And so I think that for me, like obviously the quarterback questions for each side are going to be interesting. Dante Moore's first big time start at Oregon against a really good Penn State team, a really good Penn State secondary in particular. But I think that the other piece too is we're going to learn a lot about the trenches of both of these teams because Oregon transferred in arguably the 2 best offensive linemen in the portal in Isaiah World from Nevada and Emmanuel Pregnon at left guard from USC. But I think that we've seen around college football, even when you transfer in good players, it can take some time just to learn the communication and scheme in order to thrive. So Penn State's going to be a challenge there. Penn State's offensive line looks like one of the best in the country, but they're going to be tested. And certainly they're going to have to run the ball for over 200 yards, you'd imagine, in order to have a chance to win this game. So a lot of interesting matchups, but the focus is squarely going to be on James Franklin in that 2-20 record against AP top 6 teams. Can they get over the top? Because if they win this game, I think that there's a very good chance that they become the new favorite to win the national championship.
Yeah, and probably number 1 in a lot of people's ballots come Sunday morning as well. Let's move on to number 17, Alabama, at number 5, Georgia. Nick Saban's gone. He's been gone. Kirby Smart, 1-6 against Alabama when Nick Saban was there. His record, when he's not facing those Nick Saban teams at Alabama elsewhere across the entire country, is practically perfect. He's only lost 8 games since 2017. Guys, this is a game where Georgia's favored. They should be favored based off what we saw from Alabama in the season opener on the road at Florida State. They have really rebounded very nicely at home with Ty Simpson at quarterback, but have done so against obviously some competition that's still not quite there above average. Wisconsin, obviously, even worse probably than they were a year ago. What are we looking out for here? Is this a situation where we're going to be talking more about Kalen Deboer on Saturday morning going into this, or are we talking about Kirby Smart and whether he can beat Alabama?
Oh, I think either way, your Kirby Smart is the takeaway. It don't matter what happens in this game, win, lose, or draw. I think it's going to be fascinating how that coming out of that game, what we are saying about Kirby Smart. Kalen Deboer. I think at the end of the day with Alabama, it's all right. We saw what you look like against Florida State, obviously. Is that just a 1-week blip, or is the team you really are the team that just dominated Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, for instance? Which Alabama are you really? Because it does seem like they look more in sync. on offense. They've gotten some things figured out, but it's a question of just what Alabama team are you really? And this Georgia team is gonna we're gonna find out when they play them. I think at the end of the day, Georgia proved that it can go in a hostile environment at Tennessee, and that Gunnar Stockton is absolutely made for it. We could tell they were holding stuff back in the first couple of weeks, and they showed that he's up for it. They've got a more vertical offense than they've had in the last few years, and they're willing to test down the field. So I'm interested in how this one plays out. I think it's going to be fascinating.
Alabama's lost 4 of their last 5 road games. Kalen Deboer is 2-4 on the road as Alabama's head coach.
A few things to make note of or worth keeping in mind when it comes to Alabama is, first of all, getting Jam Miller back, a running back this week. Huge for them, one of their better players offensively who has not played to this point of the year. And then the same thing with Tim Keenan along the defensive line. We have one of their team leaders. We have one of the better players for them on defense. That in itself will make a difference. I also have to make note of just the progression that you've seen from Ty Simpson at quarterback during the course of the 2 weeks since the Florida State game. So since that game, he's something along the lines of 41 of 46 for in excess of 600 yards and 8 total touchdowns with no turnovers. You've seen, and albeit against Wisconsin and ULM, lesser competition, still you've seen a better Ty Simpson on display compared to that first game. And I know
and a better Ryan Williams, finally, the guy we were kind of harping on, right?
To go along with Jeremy Bernard continuing to look like someone who's deserving of first-round consideration at receiver, Isaiah Horton. There's talent there, and it gives me a good segue into my last point, which is just there is too much next-level talent on this team for them to be just the team that we saw against Florida State. So obviously this will be a measuring stick for them, and we'll see just whether Alabama is more like that team against Wisconsin that we saw, or the team that we saw against Florida State. But I am just still of the mindset that there are too many next level players on this team for the Alabama that we saw against Florida State to be the real Alabama.
And I think that the other thing that I'd point to is that Kalen Deboer has been a great punch-up coach. He hasn't always done the best in moments where his teams are favored, but you look back at that Georgia game last year, they jump out to a huge lead because they come out with a great game plan. They really throw it over the top of Georgia's heads, and Georgia was reeling for the first 2.5 quarters of that game. And I think that the talent gap between these two teams is closer in some ways in 2025 than in 24. So I think that this is a huge spot for the Tide, because if you win this game, if you go on the road and beat Georgia, all's forgiven, right? Like all is forgiven for the past couple of weeks. And it also reestablishes you as one of the it teams in the SEC, as a playoff contender, as a national title contender. And I think that you've looked at them since that first game. And yes, lesser competition to this point, but they have been electric through those next couple of games. I think that Ty Simpson has looked so much more comfortable. I think that offensive line has looked more cohesive. Sometimes the team just needs to get punched in the face a little bit to realize that you got to get up off the mat. And I think that this is a huge opportunity for Alabama to come out and do this. And by the way, like obviously Tennessee is an elite team, but like Georgia's defense has some cracks in it. This is not 2021 Georgia anymore. As Chris Hummer would say, maybe a little bit of a mid unit for Georgia. But I think that, again, they're not the same kind of killers on that end that they were a couple years ago. That doesn't mean that you're going to score 40 against them, although I guess they did last year. But I do think that it means, hey, if you can get to 30 and give Gunnar Stockton enough weird looks that you can keep him under 30, which I think that is much more possible than Tennessee with some of the cornerbacks that were out for that game. I think that you put yourself in a really good position to go on the road and pick up a win.
We got number 22.
And we talked a lot during the build up to the season just about Georgia's receiver group and how good they felt about that group. One of the standout players for them during the offseason and during fall camp was Noah Thomas, the transfer from Texas A&M, 6'6", led Texas A&M in touchdown catches last year, and produced some moments during the course of fall camp that led to people at Georgia saying that he frankly looked unguardable at times, yet through this point of the year ranks ninth on Georgia in receiving yards with all of 24. I wonder if this is a moment where, I don't know if you can say I've been saving him, but if this is an opportunity now for him to start to emerge, to go along with Zach Branch that you've seen, Colby Young, London Humphrey, some of those other pieces that have been more relied upon through this point of the year.
Let's move on to number 22 Notre Dame at Arkansas. Just to hit on one, Sam Pittman obviously on the hot seat for Arkansas, but also Notre Dame, obviously win or die situation. You're going to have to win out to have a shot to get into the college football playoff. That's a lot more pressure, but you look at their schedule, it's manageable if that defense improves. USC probably the toughest opponent remaining on that schedule, but Arkansas is only like a 4.5 point underdog in this. And in fact, I was looking at our CBS Sports picks this week. I saw some folks picking Arkansas. This is a big situation for both head coaches, really.
Oh, you got Marcus Freeman answering questions about whether he's going to call the defense here, whether he's going to step in and get his hand more in the defense. You got Sam Pittman on the hot seat. I mean, we were hearing some crazy rumors, the insiders here this weekend, about what may or may not have happened with Sam Pittman. Like, I just think the vibes are awful. Like, on both sides, the vibes are terrible coming into this game. You've got one coach that's squarely on the hot seat, another that's nowhere near, but that doesn't change the fact that everybody's coming into this game kind of feeling bad. And Brandon, I just want to ask you kind of about we talked about the Bobby Petrino stuff earlier in the week, and you know, you reported on that and you kind of clarified that kind of stuff. When you hear Bobby Petrino's talking to some boosters and Sam Pittman's on the hot seat, those are two things that don't go together very well. And that kind of goes into what I think is just, as I've said, a terrible vibe around the Arkansas program right now.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, I got quite a bit of pushback in the local media about the Bobby Petrino stuff, but listen, he has been talking to people. I'm not backing off from my reporting. I'll issue a correction when a correction is needed. There's no correction needed in my reporting there. And Bobby Petrino, very much so behind the scenes, is someone that is seen as the de facto push up here if he was to need to be an interim coach with Sam Pittman, when and if he gets fired. But I'll tell you, everybody's just a matter of when with Sam Pittman. But you beat Notre Dame, that cloudies a situation. It gives you a little bit more of a lifeline. Obviously, you can't make a change there. And I think because of the changing atmosphere in college football, unless you have just completely, as a head coach, lost your team and it's just dreadful, you're probably not going to get fired early in the season. We've seen some really extraordinary situations with UCLA and Virginia Tech. Not only were they 0-3, but they lost to bad programs that they were expecting to beat, including New Mexico and Old Dominion. But to me, the Arkansas situation is you've lost 2 games, but you lost off of a fumble late against a nationally ranked Ole Miss team that, by the way, is favored against a top 5 LSU team this week. And you lost in a crazy, weird fashion against Memphis, which does not set well, but you look competitive in all these games. The other programs that have made changes, they haven't looked competitive. So when you look at everything, 30-day transfer window and all the complications, it's very hard really for a program to make a decision and make a change in the middle of the year unless that coach has absolutely lost the program. And I'm not seeing that yet with Arkansas, but it's probably just a matter of time because the writing has been on the wall there for quite some time. All right, guys.
This legitimately is a team that could be 4-0, and you touched on it some.
Yeah.
They were inside the 30-yard line against Ole Miss, down 6. And with the Memphis game, they're inside the red zone, driving for what would be a game-winning field goal, has a fumble, leads to them losing that game. This is a team that very easily could be 4-0 instead of 2-2.
Yeah, and that's why Vegas knows. That's why the line's only 4.5 right now. We'll see. I'll be there. I wasn't scheduled to be there, but I'm staying home this weekend, and I'm going to go there. So we'll see what happens there in Fayetteville. Okay, we're going to take a quick break here on the College Football Insiders before we get into our intel and the latest we're hearing around the sport. You're listening to College Football Insiders. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You just saw a preview there on YouTube. UNLV Wyoming. That's a sneaky good game there in the group of 6 level. All right, so let's go on here to a great game, great matchup. So many storylines. We've got We got number 14 LSU at number 13 Ole Miss. You've got Landry Kiffin hard launching relationships with LSU linebacker Whit Weeks on social media. You got Lane Kiffin, who always is just entertaining. An incredible offense. You got a quarterback situation there at Ole Miss that's perked some eyebrows with the Ferris State transfer. Trinidad Chambliss taking over for Austin Simmons and doing a remarkable job. And then, of course, you got the LSU offense that hasn't quite hit its stride for whatever reason, but with a defense that looks like a top 5 unit. So much on the line here. It's the Magnolia Bowl, one of the more underrated early season rivalry games in the SEC that no one pays attention to, but means quite a bit to both programs. I can't wait to watch this. Matt, I wanted to start with here because Trinidad Chambliss, to me, is the big story going into this. We all expected Austin Simmons to start. Well, he injures his ankle, paves the way for Trinidad Chambliss to come in, who wasn't even going to go to Ole Miss. He was going to go elsewhere, right? And then he stepped in, and he's been marvelous. We had a great piece earlier this week from Richard Johnson, Chris Hummer on this. We've been all over it. But, Matt, what are you hearing from other coaches out there when they kind of look at the game tape of Trinidad Chambliss and how well he fits in this Lane Kiffin offense?
Something that sums it up well, from my opinion, there was a coach during the course of the last couple of weeks during the build-up to facing Ole Miss that said, while among some other staff members, that Ole Miss and Lane would be doing them a favor if they played Austin instead of Trinidad. Opposing coaches feel like Trinidad is the clearly better of the two quarterbacks, and you've seen him go out there during the course of the last couple of weeks, and these last 2 starts put up in each of them in excess of 800 yards of total offense. It's reached a point where not only based on the numbers, but just what he looks like while producing them, where I've had multiple coaches say that at times reminds them of a Kyler Murray type figure. I'm not saying he's Kyler, that he's going to go number 1 overall in the draft or something like that, but have had coaches bring up that they are reminded at times of Kyler with just some of the things that he's done the last couple of weeks.
All right, Trinidad Chambliss better than Patrick Mahomes. You heard it here first from Matt Zenitz. What I think is fascinating about Trinidad Chambliss, and you mentioned, Brandon, the story that Chris and I did this week, is, yes, how he got to Ole Miss. First and foremost, the Ole Miss coaches did not have that high of an opinion as Matt and the coaches that he spoke to before the season. It's not that they didn't think he could play. It's that they didn't expect this from him. I mean, he's been nothing short of outstanding. But you know who did? The coaches and the personnel staff at Temple. They had a connection to his quarterback trainer from somebody in their personnel department. They reached out, they got some of the tape, and they cut it on when he went into the portal, and they said, oh, this guy can go. And so they got to a point where they made him an offer, and now he didn't come on campus or hadn't come on campus yet. The plan was, we're going to get you on campus. We're going to get you a video from Joe Flacco. We're going to get you a video from ESPN's Kevin Nagandi. We're going to treat you like the president in Philly on that day, and you're going to commit and you're going to sign, seal, and deliver, and we're going to have a program-changing player. The problem was that visit was scheduled for a Monday, but on the Saturday, Trinidad Chambliss took a visit to Oxford. And when Temple's staff and building found out was when Ole Miss's staffers gave them a call and said, hey, Trinidad is going to be flying up to you from Oxford instead of where he was at up in Michigan. Well, that never happened because Trinidad never left Oxford, apparently. What happened was basically Ole Miss put some money in front of him and an opportunity in front of him and said, if you leave, that offer is going to get pulled effectively. So they wouldn't let him out of the building. And they certainly wouldn't let him go to Philadelphia. And so, yeah, now he's a quarterback at Ole Miss. And now he's impressing everybody except for Temple, that is.
It's incredible. Look at Trinidad Chambliss's numbers here. He's got the second best passer rating in the SEC behind Ty Simpson. And Trinidad arguably has probably played against better competition, at least here in a more pressure situation as well off the bench. He's thrown for 719 yards. He also leads the SEC in yards per pass attempt at 11.6 yards. So it isn't like he's dinking and dunking and getting these great ratings. No, he's throwing downfield. Remarkable stuff for a guy that was just at Ferris State not that long ago.
Well, and I will say too, just for people who don't know kind of the small college world, Harris State, Division II power. He won 2 national titles in 3 years. He was essentially a 3,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard rusher at that level as I guess a junior in his final year, while leading them to a national championship. I had been told by somebody that there were coaches trying to get him into the portal in the fall window, and he was initially going to stay put, ends up leaving in the spring instead, and obviously ends up as what looks like a backup at Ole Miss, but ends up being the starter. And you've seen a lot of programs in the SEC especially invest a lot of money into their backup quarterback situation. Some that have worked out, some that haven't. One that comes to mind is Jacob Zeno, UAB starter, going from UAB to Texas A&M. He gets beat out now as third string quarterback, but he got a paycheck to come and do it. There's sort of this understanding that it's harder than ever to keep guys on campus. So bringing in guys who know that they might be a backup is still something that's very much worth it. And when you have a situation like this with Trinidad Chambliss, somebody who's started, for an entire season in 2024, played a lot of snaps as well as a sophomore. It's just, you can't beat experience. And you see him come in now to an offense that obviously leans on his skill set at a high level. I think it's been potentially a game-changing move at that position. This was an Ole Miss team that had to replace a lot from their very, very good 2024 team. He, in many ways, has been the transition point to 2025, and maybe is somebody who can help raise their ceiling as well.
We'll talk more LSU Ole Miss here later in the show and do quick picks. And I know we didn't talk much about LSU, but we will get to that here later. Let's move on to number 1, Ohio State at Washington. Ohio State, number 1 in the polls, 8.5-point favorite against the Huskies. That's the shortest spread for a number 1 team against an unranked opponent in 11 years. Am I missing something going into this? And what are we really looking at? What are the big storylines with Ohio State going on the road for the first time?
Well, I think you got to factor in the fact that Washington has looked really, really good. We talked about Oregon and Penn State not playing anybody. Washington also hasn't really played anybody. UC Davis on the schedule, I think. Washington State last week they pulled away from in the fourth quarter there. But they've looked really, really good in doing it. So you have to give them credit for that. I think that's the point. For me, coming into the season, what I was told from Ohio State sources is that the defensive line was something that they were a little concerned about. They're a little concerned about the drop-off from last week. That is a particularly bad matchup against the running attack that Damon Williams and Jonah Coleman, the 1-2 punch of quarterback and running back, can bring to the table there. Jonah Coleman's an absolute load at running back. He's a thick player, can move, really fun to watch, and one of the nation's best. So you're going to have to stand up against what Washington brings to the table. And we don't really know how Julian Sayan's going to operate in an environment like it's going to be. I think it's a purple out. I think they said it's going to be this week. Did Jed Fish ask everybody to wear purple? Be loud. We know that place can crank up.
Oh yeah,
Husky State can crank up a little bit. So it's going to be a hostile environment for Ohio State. And the thing that I have been wondering about Ohio State, we know what Jeremiah Smith can do, but I've been wondering what the non-Jeremiah Smith wide receivers can do. And there's no Emeka Egbuka opposite Jeremiah Smith, which I think was massive for Smith's development so quickly last season. You don't have that this year. So I want to see what that Ohio State passing game can really be once Jeremiah Smith gets done with his 150 yards and 2 touchdowns or whatever he's going to do.
Well, and let me say this. I mean, when you talk about Washington's offense, I'm not saying it's definitive, but put Jeremiah Smith to the side for a second. There's a really good case that Washington has the best quarterback, running back, and wide receiver outside of Jeremiah Smith in the Big Ten right now. Like, they are loaded on offense. Damon Williams is playing as well as anybody in the country right now, both as a passer and runner. Like you mentioned, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Between Jonah Coleman and Damon Williams, they have like 560 yards through the first 3 games, which is unbelievable. Denzel Boston, like we kind of talked about, I mean, 16 catches, 249, 3 like, these are big boy numbers for this offense. I think in some ways, I mean, it's funny because they played Texas in week 1. This is a different kind of challenge in some ways in terms of explosiveness than what Texas brought to the table, especially with some of Arch's struggles. And then defensively, this team is very deep as well. They are going to fight in the trenches decently well. Probably the thing I'm most curious about, though, is their top corner, Takario Davis, a transfer from Arizona, who kind of grew up with Jed Fish at Arizona, was out last week for their game against Washington State. He's questionable right now. Now, I don't think that we were necessarily going to get him one-on-oneing Jeremiah Smith, but he's kind of able to take away Carnell Tate, etc., right? And I think that the game plan changes quite a bit if he's limited in this game.
It's been 7 years since these programs met. Last time was Urban Meyer's last game as Ohio State's head coach. Been quite some time there. And as you said, this environment's going to be rocking. I can't wait. I wonder what the weather is going to be like there. We'll have to take a look at that.
Probably rainy.
Number 21 U.S. Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, as a follow-up to Damon Williams, a talented, dynamic, dual-threat player that now gets an opportunity to introduce himself to a national audience. So it's probably there's a level of unknown about him, even with everything that he's done through the early part of this year, and even coming off a 5-touchdown performance against Washington State, where he had some real standout moments during the course of that game. This is his chance to introduce himself to a national audience against Ohio State. And you guys obviously mentioned some of the supporting cast and talent that has around him. I wouldn't forget either just about Amari Evans, transfer from Penn State, had a 60-yard touchdown last week. Another piece to go along with Denzel Boston in that receiver group. That's a weapon for Damon Williams.
Damon Williams, third in the nation, 11.4 yards per pass attempt. All right, let's move on. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, number 121 USC at number 23 Illinois. Illinois, of course, coming off that 53-point defeat at Indiana. Illinois in a bad spot, needing to rebound if they want to stay in the thick of things to get a playoff berth out of the Big Ten. And they meet a resurgent USC team that seems to have things finally kind of clicking a little bit better than we've seen in recent seasons. This is a big-time prove-it spot for USC, is it not? And especially for Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, I think that we talk about Jacoby Lane and how good he is. He didn't play last week. They haven't really said why, I don't think. But it seems like he might go in this game. And if he does go, then it's further issues for Illinois, obviously, without Xavier Scott, their best nickel corner, excuse me, who's going to be out for quite a bit here, it seems. So, I think it was clear that Illinois was overrated. I think many of us had Illinois as our most overrated team heading into the season in the Big Ten. Now, I didn't think that meant 53-point loss to Indiana overrated. I'm not going to be ridiculous about it. But how far is Illinois going to fall? Is Illinois going to let that loss beat them twice, so to speak, in a game against USC? That's what I'm really looking forward to in this game.
And this is the moment where we figure out, is this Jaden Mayava thing real? Because right now, he leads the nation in passer rating ahead of our boy, Fernando Mendoza at Indiana to this point. And like you said, without Jacoby Lane last week, but Mekhi Lemon has been one of the nation's most productive receivers. He might be leading the nation actually right now in receiving yards. And this offense it's looked like a Lincoln Riley offense for the first time since Caleb Williams was on campus. The thing that Jaden Mayava gives you, of course, the former UNLV transfer, is he is a dual threat player, right? The running has always been there. He's been an accomplished passer, but one who wasn't necessarily an NFL passer through the first couple of weeks. He's averaging, I think, also over 12 yards per pass attempt. He's been dynamic. He's been explosive. Like, they can beat you in any way right now. And the biggest key for them, for this USC team to have a chance to be really good, is their offensive line has held up pretty well. Now, will that continue going into a game like this? Because if there's one thing that Brett Bielema teams like to do, they like to bully you, right? They like to try to beat you up front, be physical with you. And defensively, again, we're still kind of not tested to this point. I like some of the personnel that they have. I think that their coaching staff, even if you go back to 2024, has done a really good job under D'Anton Lynn. There's a reason he's being rumored for head coaching jobs at this point. But this is a big prove-it spot for, I think, both Jaden Mayava and this defense to come out and say, hey, we deserve to be in that, let's call it the Indiana conversation of third, fourth best team in the Big Ten and a chance to make it to the college football playoff.
The numbers are one thing. People at USC, even outside of the numbers, feel like Jaden Mayava is a different player and is just much improved compared to where he was last year. And to go along with that, the numbers are impressive. So has thrown for in excess of 1,200 yards through the first 4 games, has 13 total touchdowns, no interceptions. I would say something helping him in that offense to go along with that is one of the best kept secrets in the Big Ten in running back Wayman Jordan, who was a JUCO addition for them and has run for more than 400 yards through the early part of the year, averaging close to 8 yards per carry. Has been just what they expected him to be, just based on how much he stood out throughout the offseason, has been as advertised, and we'll get a chance going into a game like this to, similar to what I said about Damon Williams, get a chance to show more a national audience what he's capable of.
One thing real quick for me, USC hasn't been a great team on third downs this season so far, but they were awesome last week in the Big Ten opener against Michigan State. 8 of 12. That's key going into this game on the road, especially if they face some third and mediums and third and shorts against an Illinois defense that likes to force those type of situations. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let's go to, well, you know what? Let's take a break real quick. Let's take a break before we get into this, because this might end up being a longer conversation. I hope it's not. I hate talking about format changes, but we'll see. Much about the college football playoff. Much more on the College Football Insiders coming up after this.
Absolutely amazing. Lamar dancing around the pocket. He does this so well. All the way for the touchdown.
We are the College Football Insiders. I'm Brendan Marcello, Richard Johnson, Shehan, Jay Araja, and Matt Zenitz. Guys, still talk about what the College Football Playoff is going to look like, the format and all that. And also, recently we got news that the ACC is going to join the SEC and the other power conferences and playing a 9th conference game. Most schools will be getting to that even as early as next year in 2026, but in 2027, it'll be in full force. If you're wondering how's that work, because they got 17 teams or whatever, well, one team's going to have to play 8 plus 2. So they're going to have to play 8 conference games and schedule 2 power conference teams.
How do they decide that? Do they just walk up to Manny Diaz and be like, it's you this year?
Well, it's pretty easy when you consider like Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech, Florida State, Louisville. Like you got a lot of teams that play.
That already have it built in. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's pretty easy to get there, I think. But we quickly about the CFP thing, because I frankly don't think any of us really want to talk about the CFP thing. But Brandon did a good job on that reporting on it yesterday, so let's shout out our guys.
This is the second time this Richard goes, Brandon, you did a good job on this, but this story sucks.
Overall, the story's good, the reporting's good, the topic stinks. With the college football playoff, man, Brandon, just tell me, man. I thought we spent the last couple years figuring out a potential format change, but now we need another committee to find another format change.
Well, no, we're going to go through, right? So we've gone through all the even numbers. Now we're going to get a 13-team proposal. We're going to get a 27-team proposal. We're going to try to figure out what are the bounds of brackets that exist depending on what dimensional plane we're on. It's are you kidding me right now? There's 12, there's 16, there's 24. What else is, unless you're going to I don't think we're going past that number. I don't think that there's a realistic chance that we're going past 24 or whatever. So what other numbers are you looking for? I don't understand. This whole thing started, by the way, because 3 people, Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12 commissioner, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, and Jack Swarbrick, then the AD at Notre Dame, sat in a room and said, this is our model for 12. We really like it. Everybody was like, cool. So why do we need more working groups? Why do we need more people to sit on committees?
Because it's college athletics. That's all they do.
Not
they
have enough
committees.
to do?
Well, we love a committee in college athletics, boy.
Is there not enough for them to do? Do they need to pick up trash on the side of the street? I don't understand.
The feeling behind this is that the commissioners don't have the time to deal with this crap right now, because they meet 3 to 4 times.
End it.
That's kind of what we're getting to. They meet 3 to 4 times a week, the power conference commissioners, and their entire time's been discussing the SCORE Act legislation, trying to get on the same page with that, and they're finally on the same page. And then also the College Sports Commission, NIL, all this other stuff that's been going on. This past week, and John Talty could tell you, our John Talty was there in Chicago for the meetings. This was the first time they've actually sat down and started talking format since June. And when they did so this week, they barely discussed it, because they're doing so many other things. So what they decided from the Big Ten's point of view, the Big Ten kind of pitched this, I was told, was let's form a committee. Let's get some athletic directors whose plates aren't already full and see what they think about all this. They're passing the buck down because they all realize they're not going to be able to settle on a format of expansion in the next 60 or so days. But this is a way to bleed in and start the conversation for 2027 about expansion. I will just add this one little thing. What is interesting about it to me is that the ADs I've spoken to around the country for the last 3 to 4 months, when we talk about the Big Ten's ideas of going to maybe 24 teams or more AQs, right? The ADs, including in conferences that are against that idea, like it. They're more open to it. So if you get the ADs at these conferences to form a working group, you get them all together, there might be more leniency among them to go, we really like that Big Ten idea of 24. And if that's the case, what's that conversation going to be like, say, in January and February, they present this back to the commissioners and they go, oh, crap.
Well, Brandon,
oh, no.
The other thing to factor in is that what's going to happen when they take it to the coaches? Because that's what happened with the SEC. The SEC ADs kind of congealed around, all right, well, we think an automatic qualifier, heavy playoff has legs. I think it's a decent idea. And then in May, they took it to their coaches, and their coaches balked at it because their coaches like the fact that it's a competitive enterprise and championships actually matter. So, yeah. So that's the other thing, Brandon, that we got to figure out. What's going to happen when you take it to the people who it really impact?
I do think it's interesting that the Big Ten has backed off a little bit about uneven automatic qualifiers, because one of their new ideas that they've discussed is everybody getting the same amount of AQs in the power conferences, but in doing so would require them to go to 24 or 28 teams. We will discuss this when actual things start happening, folks. So let's move on. My goodness.
I will say one thing real quick. I'm actually really intrigued by the ACC moving to 10 power conference games, because let's look back at last year in 2024. The AC, like everybody talks about the SEC with their 8-game conference schedule, but one, a bunch of those teams have those dedicated rivalries, like you said.
With the ACC,
yeah. And two, like the quality of teams in play means that if you're playing an 8-game conference schedule in the SEC, you're playing at least 6 quality teams on your schedule. That is not the case in the Atlantic Coast Conference. You can go through an entire season and play like 2 quality teams across your entire schedule. I think that it's actually going to be really striking for people in 2026 when this starts, that a whole bunch of teams that managed to skate by for a long time are going to add an extra loss, right? Last year, for example, the reason in so many ways that the ACC got 2 teams in and not 1 was because SMU missed everybody during their run. So even though they lost to BYU head-to-head in the non-conference, it didn't matter because they didn't
Well, the
play.
difficult thing there, though, is none of us figured that Florida State would be as bad as they were. And they had Florida State. And they played Florida State and Louisville.
But there's going to be one of those teams every single year is the thing, right? You don't know who the team is going to be heading in. But like, I mean, again, obviously I'm coming at it from Big 12 country. That's a huge difference versus the Big 12, where you add an extra loss for half of the teams in the league. So I think this is going to be more consequential for the ACC than maybe any other conference moving to 9.
Okay, let's move into Inside the Insiders, where we discuss some things we have been working on or have already published at cbssports.com, or things we're looking into the future. I said this would start with me, but it seems weird to transition to me. So let's transition to Shehan. What have you been working on? What are you looking at?
Yeah, well, after publishing like 4 features last week, I decided to take it a little easy this week. But no, I did a round of first-year coaching grades. Only been 4 games to this point, but like it's been a fascinating class in so many ways. 28 new coaches, 5 of them at the power conference level. I gave out 1 F. That would be at the man in Chapel Hill right now. Not a good start, especially against power conference competition. The Mountain West, though, Loki has a really good crop of first-year coaches. I gave out 4 A's. 3 of them were in the Mountain West. The other was Dan Mullen, who I gave a B+. They're 4-0, but like they have
their schedule hasn't been great.
Well, and they took the long way to get to 4-0, man. They needed every second to beat Miami.
Should have lost Idaho State, man.
They should have lost.
I was going to say they needed every second to beat an FCS team in Week 0.
Yep. So it's 4-0, but it's very like, hey, bro, you good? You good? 4-0.
They were impressive last week in their comeback on the road at Miami, Ohio. I got to watch the end of that. It was pretty good.
But they shouldn't have needed to come back against Miami of Ohio. But that's anyway. Point is, very impressive crop. Jason Eck, of course, at New Mexico pulls off that big victory against UCLA. Bronco Mendenhall is everything that we thought that Bronco Mendenhall was.
He's Mr. Cover the Spread for me this year.
I know that he obviously came back on his own terms to New Mexico, and also on his own terms to Utah State, but like that dude should be able to have almost any job that he wants, man. He is such a good coach. And Matt Entz at Fresno State as well. I gave him a lot of credit for going 3-1, but really talented group this year, really good group overall. I don't think that outside of Belichick, there's been any obvious terrible hires through at least the first couple of games. And, again, we'll obviously continue to keep you updated as the season comes to a close, but looks like a pretty solid group overall.
What do you give Zach Kitley at FAU? Because they've struggled a little bit.
Yeah, I gave him a C-, I believe. Yeah, they had to flip over a lot. And I mean, this FAU team under Tom Herman was pretty bad, right? So I definitely gave some context to like, hey, did you lose a lot? Did you step into a rough situation? Like we talked about earlier on the show, Zach Kitley got they lose that game against rival FIU for the first time in, I believe it's 9 years.
Listen, Nick Saban will tell you, Willie Simmons is legit, man.
Yep, Willie Simmons is that dude. Yep.
He's anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, he's going to be very fun for that program. I got a chance to talk to some folks on that staff over the offseason. But yeah, I think Kitley, obviously not the ideal start that you wanted, but it hasn't been a disaster either.
Richard, what do you want to talk about, man?
Well, besides the Chambliss stuff, we were talking about the Trinidad Chambliss stuff earlier in the show. It's just fascinating when you kind of break into some of these, recruiting battles, and you see that there's some cash with some of these G5 programs, and I think the fallout from that story is interesting because then when you publish a story with sources, you then you text the story to the source, and you have a little bit of post-mortem about it. And I was talking to one of the guys that we talked to on the Temple staff. And he basically was like, at the end of the day, it's not so bad because it does show that we're willing to spend money and we're willing to play ball on a quarterback. So obviously we'd rather have Trinidad Chambliss than not have Trinidad Chambliss. But at the end of the day, there's something of a marketing for our program and our personnel department.
It also shows you do a great job identifying talent, right?
And evaluation, yes. That was the other thing. One of the sources I talked to on the Temple side said, in our building, we're kind of back and forth between being really excited about it because it confirms our evaluations and just being really annoyed because he's not in our building and he's elsewhere. So it's just kind of funny how that kind of panned out and how that works. I just think it's funny, kind of the way it shook out. It's just interesting that, man, Temple really had a shot at this. Or at least they believe they had a shot.
Yeah. Well, it's like a lot of like college baseball teams that are really good. They get a lot of great talent and then they wait and see if they're going to enter the MLB draft, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the situation a lot of Group of 6 schools are in when they feel like we've discovered a diamond in the rough. We hope no one else comes calling.
Yeah, and I will say,
based on the current situation at Ole Miss, Lane keeps coming back to the fact that when Austin Simmons is healthy, that he's still their starting quarterback. Obviously, things could change depending on how Trinidad does this weekend, but based on what he's looked like the last couple of weeks, it's going to be a hard time for Austin to get that job back. And it's also important to note that Austin was up and down during the course of fall camp, had some turnover issues during the course of fall camp, had 4 interceptions through his first couple starts. Couple that with the fact that Trinidad's played like he has. If he goes out there and plays at a respectable level against LSU, regardless of what Lane has said about Austin to this point, it's going to be hard for him to get that job back.
Great defense of LSU. You perform well against that. Oof.
And I will say, the coach at Temple, by the way, I don't think we mentioned, is Casey Keeler. Came over from Sam Houston, considered to be one of the greatest FCS coaches of all time. So it's not a huge surprise to me that they found a kid at the Division II level that they felt like was undervalued. He won an FCS national championship at Sam Houston in 21. He won one at Delaware back in, I believe it was 2007. So like, this is somebody who knows the small college world just about as well as anybody. And again, you know, they missed on this particular D2 kid. I'd imagine they have another really good one coming down the road.
I've been working this week.
If you see Temple on that, you go over to 247, you see Temple in that list of offers, you better watch out. Guy can play.
I've been working this week on a story about Mississippi State and their ability to try and jump back, right? They only won 2 games last year. They're off to a 4-0 start for the first time in 11 seasons. It's been that long. They beat Arizona State earlier this year. They've got Tennessee this week in a much more difficult challenge, but the moment is there, right? The opportunity is there. And so I wanted to look at how did they rebuild this roster so quickly from the abysmal performances we saw last season. Of course, they got Blake Shapen back at quarterback, but I think a lot of people forgot that he was injured in week 4. He broke a bone in his shoulder, couldn't play the rest of the season. Now he's healthy. He's a 6-year guy, veteran guy, a lot of experience. And then they went in the portal and just absolutely killed it with the guys they wanted. They went and got guys that head coach Jeff Lebby has already had relationships with, including Brennan Thompson, the receiver, who he had coached and recruited previously. Anthony Evans, who he recruited previously. And they believe they might be the 2 fastest or faster receivers in all of college football. And they've really allowed this offense to explode and stretch the field a little bit better. They got 34 transfers this offseason, right? 16 of them are offensive and defensive linemen, and that's where they really improved, especially up front along that defense. And that's really been kind of the game changer for them. They got 4 starters in total that are transfers immediately, and a lot more of that obviously in the 2 deep. They've played 4 or 5 different offensive line rotations because they're still trying to figure things out there to get together and gel. But it's an interesting kind of rebuild project there for Jeff Lebby. They feel like that they finally have gotten the pieces there together. And it was just interesting talking to their GM about how last year, the Arizona State game last year, early in the year at halftime, he was texting his assistant GM going, you need to go start identifying defensive linemen we can go recruit in the transfer portal now. Do not wait till the end of this game or tomorrow. We need to do it now. We're not equipped. We're not equipped to win right now. And they look quite a bit different right now. We'll see what happens the rest of the season, but 4-0 after being 2-10, that's quite the turnaround for the Bulldogs. That story will be at cbssports.com on a Friday morning, I believe. Matt,
us Blake Shapen truthers rejoice. I've been on this train since 2020, and it has not borne very many fruit since then.
Remember, he had to step in and win a Big 12 championship for Baylor, and he's just been injured off and on, and now he's finally healthy. So good luck to them. Matt, you were talking to us before the show about NFL scouts and what they're thinking about this quarterback class, and just the up and down variations we've been hearing about them. What are you hearing out there about a quarter of the way through the season, almost near the halfway point?
Yeah. So something that's become clear on my end just through conversations this week, including today, is just how wide open the race is to be QB1 for next year's draft, and just overall how wide open this quarterback class is. So the consensus among NFL personnel staffers that I talked to heading into the year was Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik as the top 2 quarterback prospects for next year's draft, with Lenora Sellers as a wild card option at number 3. It's at a point now where Cade has obviously struggled and has gone from being viewed as a potential top 5 overall draft pick to maybe not even being somebody who goes in the top 5 overall rounds of the draft. Garrett has been up and down to a certain degree, along with LSU's offense through the early part of the year, even though he's still viewed as
how much of that is the upper body thing? What are you hearing on that, Matt?
In terms of Cade?
Yeah, no, in terms of Garrett Nussmeier.
Mainly, it's just been what's been on film through the early part of the year. So that's been what's been referenced with me, and just they've been up and down from a play standpoint through the early part of the year. And again, it's been more than just him. It's been the LSU offense as a whole. But to go along with that, you've also seen some quarterbacks that have risen throughout the first month of the season. John Mateer being one, to the point that had an NFL scouting director bring up as recently as today that he has put himself in a position where he has a legitimate chance to be QB1 in next year's draft. Obviously, it's unfortunate that he's hurt right now, and hopefully he gets back at some point in the next few weeks. The current expectation is that he'll be back at some point in the next few weeks, next month, something along those lines. Fernando Mendoza, a riser. And then to go along with that, two other interesting ones. Carson Beck has definitely stood out through the first month of the season to NFL scouts. And as one NFL personnel staffer brought up this week, has gotten back to what you expected to see from Carson Beck last year. And he was actually on the verge of putting a starter level grade, NFL starter level grade on Carson heading into the Florida game. And then Carson didn't perform during the Florida game like we was looking for him to do during the course of that game. But another one to go along with Carson that started to come up some is Dante Moore. And something interesting that was referenced with Dante was that you just see a night and day difference in the tape this year at Oregon compared to what you saw at UCLA, even though, like we referenced earlier in the show, he's going to face far and away his biggest challenge yet this weekend compared to what he's seen through the early part of the season. But what he's done through the first four games definitely has not gone unnoticed from an NFL scout perspective.
Okay, let's move in to our quick picks for this week. We've got 4 ranked matchups in the top 25 this week. Big ones all across the board. So let's just get started. We'll go around the horn, starting with Richard with number 17, Alabama, at number 5, Georgia.
I think the Dogs have their day in this game. I think they're the better team than Alabama, and they look more functional at this point in time. Georgia wins.
Could see it going either way. Georgia's the safe bet in this game, but could legitimately see it going either way.
I think it's the bounce back spot. I think that Alabama comes out focused and hungry. I think they pull off the big upsets.
Georgia, Kirby Smart finally gets that big win against Alabama to get closer and closer to 500 against the Tide in his career. Number 4, LSU at number 13, Ole Miss.
I'm taking Ole Miss in this game. I think that LSU has serious problems running the ball. I think that's going to be the difference in this game. Ole Miss wins the is this the Lane Kiffin Bowl, the Landry Kiffin Bowl? I don't know what we're calling it. I think the Rebels win.
The Whit Weeks Bowl.
I'll take LSU. LSU, regardless of the ups and downs offensively, has the talent that they do on that side of the ball and playing great ball defensively. Take LSU in this game.
This is a huge spot for Trinidad Chambliss. I mean, he's never played a secondary like this, straight up. I think that he has a few mistakes in this game. I think that it's a very low-scoring affair, but I'm hopeful that Garrett Nussmeier can get it back on track. I'm taking LSU.
I will add in real quick, by the way, just in terms of NFL draft risers, Mansour Delane, cornerback for LSU, has been one of the biggest overall risers nationally through the early part of the year, has played at the kind of level that, as one NFL scout put it this week, has put himself in the mix to be a first-round pick next year, has played at that kind of high level, and somebody worth keeping an eye on heading into this game.
Give me Ole Miss just so I can see Lane Kiffin troll his daughter after the game. Okay. Number 1, Ohio State at Washington.
I think Ohio State wins this game, but depending on where you got the spread, you can see like 8.5. I think Washington covers 8.5.
Take Ohio State in this game. Safe bet, but Damon Williams is a tough matchup and could create some issues for Ohio State in that game.
Yeah, this one's going to get frisky. This one's going to get fun. For me, I think that it comes down to I wish that Washington's defense was a little healthier. And for that reason, I'm going Ohio State.
I'm going Buckeyes. Julian Sayin has been very, very underrated and overlooked so far this season. Everybody wants to give credit to Jeremiah Smith. Give Julian some of his roses and flowers. All right, number 24, TCU at Arizona State. This is a spicy one to me.
Fun Friday night, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm taking TCU. I still have not seen much of anything out of the non-Jordan Tyson pass catchers from Arizona State at all. Josh Hoover's great. I'm taking TCU.
I'm still high on TCU, taking TCU in that game.
Yeah, this is I think the true prove it spot for TCU. Obviously, SMU and North Carolina were good appetizers. This is the main course. I think they come out. I think they win by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, Hypnotoad all the way. And Josh Hoover, better than Sam Levitt at this point in the season, has got more weapons around him. Number 11, Indiana at Iowa.
I know all the Big Ten people get a little anxious when they see Iowa on the schedule because of what they are. I think Indiana handles Iowa. Mark Gronowski in the Iowa passing game has not been what it was supposed to be coming into the season. I know they kind of got it rolling with a special teams touchdown against Rutgers, but give me Indiana in this game.
I appreciated what Kurt Signetti said the other day, that this is a bigger challenge, a much bigger challenge than what they faced last week. Even with that being said, taking Indiana in this game, clicking on both sides of the ball, extremely impressive with Fernando Mendoza on the offensive side of the ball and putting up 60+ last week. But at the same time, shouldn't be overlooked just the job they continue to do defensively to go along with that. And the fact they held Illinois to 10 points or whatever it was to go along with all of the success they had offensively.
Yeah, this is I think they're going to be stress tested in 2 areas. This is the best secondary that Fernando Mendoza has ever faced. This is the best offensive line maybe in the country right now with the way that they're playing. But I don't think the result will be in question. Indiana rolls.
Hoosiers by 10. Number 21 USC at number 23 Illinois.
I'm taking SC. They're not going to be 53 points worse than USC, but I do think Illinois is worse than USC. USC wins.
I like, once again, like we talked about earlier in the show, just the progression that you've seen from Jaden Mayava. Take USC in this game.
Breakout moment for Jaden Mayava, I think. A huge opportunity on a big stage. And the fact that Illinois is down their best cover corner, I think, is a huge deal going against this receiving core.
USC, everybody's wondering Sunday, is Lincoln Riley back? And then we get to deal with that for a couple of weeks. Number 22 Notre Dame at Arkansas.
Yeah, tight spread. I think it's about 6.5. I don't really get it. I think Notre Dame handles business in this game, to be honest with you.
I don't know. I'm intrigued by Taylon Green. Taylon Green's a better player than a lot of people on a national level realize. I think that Arkansas has the capability to maybe go out and surprise some people in this game, led by Taylon, if he can play to the level that he's capable of playing at.
I think that Taylon Green is fantastic. I think that Notre Dame is better at almost every other one of the 21 positions on the field. I think that they pull away.
2 bad defenses, 2 great offenses. Razorbacks are playing at home. I think they end up getting a turnover or 2, which ends up being the difference in a game that finishes in the 30s. Razorbacks win.
Wow, you're betting on Arkansas getting a turnover late in the game.
I know. Well, we'll see. No, they haven't gotten many this year either, so we'll see. Auburn at number 9 Texas A&M. Can Auburn bounce back against the Aggies who are on a hot streak?
I think Auburn's defense has a little something for Texas A&M. I am a little concerned about Auburn's secondary, but I think Auburn with the defensive front has a little bit for A&M, and I think Jackson Arnold, frankly, ends up running wild.
Auburn's a better team than you would think. Coming off loss to Oklahoma, doesn't get the credit that maybe deserved because of having lost that game. That said, I'm a big believer in A&M. That's a potential playoff team, and picking A&M in this game.
Yeah, if you're talking a little something, I think that you mean a little bad secondary, and I think that Marcel Reed is going to have his way with Auburn. Give me the Aggies.
I'm shocked Auburn was in the game giving up 9 sacks last week, but they were up in the final 7 minutes against OU and had a chance to win it still. But I like the Aggies. They're so explosive offensively. And as you guys said, that defense on the second level gives me concern. I'm going Aggies. Number 15, Tennessee at Mississippi State. Is Stark Vegas rocking after this game?
Yeah, less cowbell. And I think Tennessee ends up winning this game. I know Mississippi State is really prickly, but I think Tennessee's a really good team.
Yeah, Joey Aguilar playing at a high level. Yeah, you have some talent in that receiver group. to go along with that, and showed some mental resolve in that game against Georgia, regardless of what the outcome was. I think this is first loss for Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State during what obviously has been a bounce back year for them.
Yeah, maybe I'll end up being wrong. I think that that game against Arizona State was a lot more about Arizona State than Mississippi State. I don't think they're capable of hanging with a team of this caliber. I think Tennessee wins easy.
Tennessee looks like a playoff team to me, even with that loss to Georgia. I like it. I think they're just going to get better and better every week going forward as well. Give me Tennessee here on the road. All right, the big one, the whiteout, Happy Valley, number 6 Oregon at number 3 Penn State. What do we got?
Been infatuated with Oregon all offseason. Think Oregon's probably the best team in the country overall right now. I think the Ducks fly in the whiteout and they beat Penn State.
If you had asked me a couple of weeks ago, I probably would have taken Penn State, but just based on what you've seen from Dante Moore through this point of the year and the fact that still have some of the questions I do about Drew Allar, to take Oregon in this game, even though this is another one that could legitimately see it going either way.
I said it earlier, through the first 3 or 4 games of the year, Oregon has played like a perfect football team, basically been good at everything. And Penn State still has that giant monkey on their back of 14 straight losses to top 6 opponents. So it's a huge prove it spot for me. And until they prove it, I'm going Oregon.
I'm going to go Penn State. I could see this end up being a low scoring game in the 20s, which will fit into Penn State's hands there at home, but we'll see. I'm going to tell you guys, this week was the most difficult for me making picks, to be quite honest, against the spread, especially. This is the most difficult week so far we've had. All right, gentlemen, that is another episode of the College Football Insiders. Big week 5 ahead. A lot of us will be out there on the road. Richard's going to be at Happy Valley, and hopefully he can get out of there and be back home by Tuesday with all the traffic, hopefully. And we'll catch up with him. We will be back Sunday with our reactions to week 5 and look ahead and all the intel we've got across the country. For Richard Johnson, Matt Zenitz, Shehan Jayaraja, I am Brendan Marcello. We will see you down the road.